All right, and then really quickly, here's our agenda. I'm just going to show the version that was latest uploaded. So if you just uploaded the agenda from the website, you'll notice it's a bit different from the other ones. We made some slight modifications just to make sure we accurately reflect what we're going to discuss today. So we'll start off with introducing ourselves with a presentation. Then Air District will provide an overview on the annual report, followed by some standing updates from CARB and the subcommittees. Then we'll recap next steps and set the agenda for next month's meeting. Then we'll have some time at the end for public comments. And sorry, I should have been scrolling as I was talking. And just as a reminder for public comment, you can submit your comments through the chat box. You can raise your hand. And if you're attending through Facebook, you can direct it through @ValleyAir or email ab617@valleyair.org. You can also submit your comments through YouTube directly on there. Our team will monitor these comments and we will read them out loud so that they are on record. Okay, that was a lot. Thank you for bearing with me. Are there any questions about anything I just shared? I don't see any raised hands and I can't see everyone at once. Okay, so before we get started, let me stop sharing my screen. Before I get started, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica Olson for some opening remarks, and then our team will introduce ourselves. Jessica.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jem. Well, I will just start with, for those of you who maybe weren't at our last meeting or the last agenda setting meeting, or even kind of a part of the process. I know people have a lot of commitments, and so you might have not been involved in the past couple months. I just kind of want to recap and just remind you why we have a new facilitator. We went through a process. Instead of just renewing our contract with our last facilitator, we went and took an open and public request for proposals, which means we post a request just out there to the public for anyone that wants to propose to be our new facilitator, to be a part of the process. We had 4 different people apply. We had 2 people that were qualified and wanted to move on to the next round. And that was where we had folks from all the different CSCs, so the 4 CSCs at the district, have the ability to submit interview questions. And those interview questions were sent to the 2 applicants that were part of the interview process. And then we had a webinar that we recorded, had questions asked live in addition to those questions, and then sent out a survey about a week later, and actually even called, I think, several of you just to make sure we got good feedback and felt like this was really a community-driven selection. And so every community independently had a majority of the communities select Harder & Company to be our next facilitator. So we're really, really excited. We do truly feel like this is a community-driven process. For those that were a part of the 617 convening, you might be familiar with Harder & Company. They were the fabulous facilitators that ran that really what ended up being like a 6.5, 7-hour total meeting if you were involved in both days and all kind of the after hours. So we're really excited on the district level to partner. We're really excited with all the meetings and transitions we've already done with the other communities. And so we also just really look forward. They've been so great about really asking a lot of questions of us and doing their homework kind of on the logistics end with the district. And then today is really to ask questions of you and make sure that they get to know you. So with that, that's the main sort of starting point of today. And then the other main piece, of course, is to talk about the annual report, just kind of give an overview. So I'll go over that in detail in a second after this. But I really, really look forward to this discussion. And I want to thank all of you who were a part of that process, who brought Harder & Company to us and who helped us select them. So with that, I'll pass it back to Jem.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. All right, so, before I begin, I also want to note this is where the co-hosts would have introduced themselves, and we did originally have one. It just turned out that they weren't able to do it tonight, but we will still have co-hosts moving forward. I just want to note that. It just last minute wasn't able to. All right, so let me go back to sharing my screen. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes just giving a presentation about our role and our approach. And really the purpose of this presentation is just to share with you how we think we should approach being a third-party facilitator. We'd also like to discuss with you your expectations and goals for this transition, and anything you've learned and anything you'd like to change, in keeping in mind what happened with the last facilitator. So I'll share a bit about myself, and then I'll pass it off to my colleagues to introduce themselves. So again, my name is Jem Segan. I'm a research associate at Harder & Company. My background is in policy and economics with a focus on sustainability. And during my time at Harder, I've had the pleasure of working on a couple projects that involve AB 617, one of which included the technical writing of the People's Blueprint. So we've had the privilege of working closely with Naomi Martinez and Kevin Hamilton last year. And this experience alone really provided a lot of insight about what implementation has looked like so far. It also gave us a lot of deeper understanding of what equitable engagement should look like for these meetings. And we will really do our best to incorporate that and use that to guide our facilitation. So I personally really look forward to being your facilitator and, supporting all your amazing work in the best way we can. So I'll hand it off to my colleagues to introduce themselves. Liz, would you like to go first?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Liz. I'm a research analyst at Harder & Company. I also have a background in environmental health as well as environmental justice, and I became interested in those fields due to personal experience growing up in Los Angeles near a freeway, and as you can imagine, developing asthma along with my brother at a young age. Due to that knowledge of how the environment is connected to health, I decided to commit myself to studying in this field and to doing work like this to really ensure that everybody has access to healthy environment. I'll pass it off to Amy.
Thanks, Liz. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Ramos, and I am a senior research consultant at Harder & Company. It's my pleasure to be part of this facilitation group for your entire region. I have a background in neuroscience. My PhD is in neuroscience. I'm very passionate about ensuring that there is a translation of science to the community so that we all can benefit from what we learn in science, and we can actually use that information to reduce the health inequities that we experience, especially here in the United States. And I became interested in environmental science because of the lack of information that gets disseminated into the community. So over the years, I've been really passionate about leaving the bench science world and doing more community science to ensure this translation of information. So my role here tonight is to ensure that there is that translation of information and that you all as CSC members are getting the right information and the right level of information from folks that are elected officials that our taxpayer dollars pay for, right? Having access to clean air is a human right. And we see our role very important in that we are here to ensure that there is a neutral facilitator that allows you all to engage in the conversation that's much needed. So you will see me in many spaces. I've been on several AB 617 projects across the state and in different communities. I've met many of you at the last AB 617 convening that we had earlier this last month already. And I look forward to working with you in many different ways. And with that said, I think I'm passing it back to Jem.
Awesome, thank you. And that's the team. Thank you both. So this next slide may be familiar to those who participated in the selection process for a new facilitator in August. We just want to bring this slide back to really bring back to the forefront some guiding principles we hold in our approach as a company. So the first is that our team focuses on centering community's voice in our work. We understand we are the stewards of your time, and we are familiar with engaging in conversations that have differing opinions, and we do that while trying to provide a safe space for community members to step up and contribute to the conversation. We also really plan to work closely with the committee members to solidify our role as facilitators to ensure that we are providing the support the group needs and not hindering any progress. We're here to serve you and make these meetings as productive and helpful as we can. And centering community voice is a crucial part of our equity-oriented framework that guides all of our work. So for example, in a little later in our presentation, we will engage with you all in a dialogue about our role as facilitators and how we can have a successful transition. So we want to hear what has worked well from the previous facilitator and how we can adapt to meet your needs and expectations. It's really important that your input helps shape us as facilitators so that we can contribute to creating a space and environment that is safe and conducive to a productive conversation. So we quickly want to walk through our role in this space, and I'm going to pass it off to Amy to start us off.
Thank you, Jem. So to that end, our team has spent some time reviewing the content that you all have provided as part of your governance structure, some of the strat planning that you all have done, and have really thought about, how to best operationalize what you mean that you need from a neutral facilitator. And so really that gets expressed in these 3 bullets that you see here on the screen. And that means that for us, we will be used for moderating the CSC meetings and for helping this committee reach consensus on several issues. And we will do that by introducing several potentially new processes or potentially keeping some of the old processes that you already have. So for example, we propose to develop an inclusive process by ensuring that all voices are heard. As you can tell, we're continuing with the translation process, ensuring that folks have availability to attend the debrief and agenda setting meetings or incorporating that into public comment. Making sure that we have time to meet with the air district. So to Jessica's point earlier, like making time to get to know the air district style, your style, and potentially meeting with environmental justice folks who are on the committee, meeting with residents individually to really hear all your perspectives so that we can lead these sessions from both the ground up and also from the top down, meaning from CARB, the air district, et cetera. So we don't personally have a stake in the outcome. As I mentioned before, we really value this idea of having transparency in a process. And with transparency comes conflicts, right? So we expect conflict to happen and we plan to mitigate those issues. And we value ourselves as a team who's helped develop many environmental justice processes. And so we see ourselves bringing that justice lens to how we facilitate each of these sessions. I'm going to pass it to Liz to go over the second item that you have here on the screen to show you how we are going to be facilitating.
So one thing we have heard is that there's a need to make this whole process more transparent and also to ensure accountability for all next steps so that they're not forgotten. One way we'll do this is to display a written summary of action items at the end of each meeting and to keep track of every action item over time to show its progress. And again, to really make sure that nothing is getting swept under the rug. For virtual meetings, that will look like the action items being displayed on the screen. And for in-person meetings, if that ever does happen, these items would be written in a way that is clearly visible to anyone in attendance. Jem?
Thank you both. If CSC members do have any concerns about our facilitation, you are welcome to direct them to the district at any time. We're always open to feedback. And if you feel comfortable doing so, we'd love to hear directly from you. We want to know if we missed anything, if there's anything we can improve. It's our priority to make sure this is working for you, and we understand we may need to pivot sometimes. And as Amy said, we'll do our best to identify conflict as it arises and confirm this with a group by reflecting back what we heard. And just one piece about our moderating. So since we do have limited time, we will be following a tight schedule to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak. So this may sometimes require that I interrupt speakers so we can stay on schedule. Before I switch to the next slide, I see Naomi, and you have your hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say, make a comment about what you said about the notes. I think that there was a lot of improvement at towards the end of our last meetings with the former facilitators. They were even showing us on at the end of each meeting, like this, not letter by letter, but just like the general summary of the meeting. I think that was effective. I do think that what is still missing, especially for people that later on join the air district, the CAR team, or even our own teams, to have a really strong access to all the different materials, because I think that beyond the notes and the agendas, especially when we're developing the SERPs and all that, there's a lot of documents that even us as advocates have been submitting to the Air District. And I just want to ensure that those are also posted in the website, because I was looking at previous meetings and I don't think that's there. And, I think it's important because, again, then we can refer back to what was said, what was shared, and what really happened beyond the summary of notes.
Definitely. We'll take that into account, and I know that our team's taking notes. Thanks for that suggestion, Naomi. All right, so we do want to spend the next 20 minutes to open up to a discussion with a group, and I think Naomi already started us off there, so thank you for that segue. We want to ensure we have aligned expectations over our transition, right? So as Amy mentioned, we reviewed your strategic planning documents that you all did earlier this year, and we have noted some changes you all already wanted to see. So Naomi named one about the notes. I know there's some changes on the agenda setting meeting and having a co-host help lead the meetings, just a few examples. But we really want to hear from you directly tonight about your responses to each of these questions. So we'll go one by one and I'll post them in the chat so you have them there, but I'm going to stop sharing so we can all see each other's faces. So we'd like to really open up to this discussion by addressing the first question. We'd love to hear from you all what will a successful transition look like? And as I post this. And as you think about this question, if it helps, you can think about what things did you like from the last facilitator that you would like to see carried on? What things would you like to avoid in this transition as a new facilitator, for the new facilitators?
So just want to add to Naomi's point, one of the things that we've been talking to the Air District about is finding a way to track the action items and accountability. So tonight is our last of the first CSCs that we've facilitated. So we are taking notes and taking action items, and we'll send the action item. We'll show you the action items and put them on the chat at the end of today's session. But we are interested in figuring out a way to track those, right? So that you can see them, figuring out where to place them. So that's one potential improvement or continuation of what was happening. And I see Naomi's hand is back up, Jem.
No, why don't you take Lisa's comment?
Go ahead, Lisa, and then Naomi.
What I would strongly suggest, and I think that would be really good, would be for your organization to go back 2 meetings and listen to them and write down what you think the action items are and see how far we've moved forward in actually getting them resolved, some action or whatever. And Jessica's going to love me on this one, but I really do like Gantt charts. I like Gantt charts where you put, this is what the action item is and what is the projective timeline of, the typical planning steps. How long is it going to take? So you can actually track if we're spinning our wheels or if we are actually moving forward. Because I think that sort of visualization would not only be good to us committee members who feel like we've been spinning our wheels for 2 years, but it actually would show Air District staff really what needs to be done, because I know that they're more of a technical mindset. So I think that would help as well as far as pushing this process forward. The other thing also too that I expect is, and I'm really enthusiastic about you getting this contract, is the whole aspect of cultural competency, because we've had to endure, members of this committee have had to endure with some kind of not so nice, I don't want to say microaggressions, but along that line and some disrespectful situations that the vendor did not realize was occurring and were not sensitive to that and never was really resolved. But it's a new day, new people. I welcome you here. I look forward to moving forward with you in a positive manner. And I really like the idea of tracking and documenting everything. That is just like, I was like, yay, when you mentioned it. So I'm very happy about that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Lisa. And those are both great suggestions. I'm a visual person, so I appreciate the Gantt chart. And we've noted both. And just speaking for my team really quickly, we take cultural competency really seriously. And sorry that you all even had to experience that at this space. Naimeen, you're next. And then I don't know what the name is, but an 805-680 can go after.
Ivanka.
Well, go ahead, Ivanka, you go first.
I just wanted to make sure that we did a check on basically just a translation check. We haven't heard from, I don't think we've really done a check to make sure that up until now lately, how is translation going and whether or not there are still needs for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivanka. Yeah, we've noted that. And I just want to, I guess, follow-up question, translation in the documents that have been shared out, such as agenda items and reports and such.
And interpretation.
And interpretation. Okay.
I'll be brief. So I think that the other situation that happened is that we started a model where one of us was invited, or we sometimes volunteered to be co-host of these meetings. However, we were under the impression that we were going to be contacted by the facilitators so that we can, prepare and see how we can have a meaningful participation as co-hosts. Because frankly, honestly, at some point it was just like the only role for the facilitator, for the co-host was like, hello, I am Naomi Martinez. Welcome to this meeting. And then at the end, great, bye. So we wanted to have a more interactive, process where the host was having a more meaningful participation. But I think that didn't happen. And I also, I think that there was a lot of disconnection of facilitators. I was several times volunteer, and I never heard from them until the day of the meeting, the morning of the meeting. And I'm like, I don't even want to do it anymore.
Yeah, yes, I hear that. And I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but our previous co-host, I think should have been invited to the agenda setting meeting as well. I'm looking for Carp. Yes, Jessica.
Yeah. And yeah. So and we can talk, I want to leave the space for everyone. We can talk at the end a little bit about agenda setting, but yes, to your point, everyone is invited to the agenda setting meeting. And then to Naimeen's point, it has, I will say, more recently, it's been kind of spotty on co-host volunteering, and we've been working kind of in the interim transition to for the Air District to reach out. So we did work closely with Kevin. We were working with Lisa, but she had a lot going on this week. So conflicts, I think, kind of ran into in preparation, and she acknowledged obviously that she wanted to put in that time that Naimeen's mentioning, but I agree, we'll work with harder to make it more robust.
Yeah, thank you, Jess. And I think the point about the agenda setting, Naimeen, is that could be an opportunity for the co-hosts to really communicate how they want to participate in the meeting so that there's the appropriate allotted time for them. I'm getting some white noise.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm driving. This is Kimberly. I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of Naomi's comment. I think I have mentioned this to you guys before when we were on the call when Ivanka and I met with you guys, but just having a bigger role for the co-hosts instead of just saying their name. And there are other CSC members who were previous co-hosts that you guys could have reached out to, not just Lisa and Kevin. I have co-hosts twice before. Ivanka has co-hosts twice before. So if there was a co-host from the CSC that was needed tonight, there's other members on the CSC that has co-hosts that you guys could have reached out to, or the Air District could have.
Okay, so it sounds like we need to work on the process of maybe selecting or electing a co-host. Sounds like we were going with volunteer, but maybe we should have a backup list of people we should outreach to in case that falls through.
Since I've been outed as the co-host that, stepped back this week, thanks, Jessica.
Was on the draft agenda, so I think people did know it was you. But
Yeah, anyway, one of the reasons why is I have a tremendous amount of stuff on my plate. And another part of the reason is, being contacted and follow through really wasn't happening in a timely manner. So that was compiling stress on me on top of the stress I was already having and the other things that were going on in my life. So at some point, something has to give. And what had to give was hosting, because had it been done in a timely manner, I would have been able to handle it. But since it wasn't, no. And the first time I did it, there was actually a complete breakdown of all sorts of communication. And it was by far one of the most negative experiences thus far in my time on the 617 committee. So there's lots of room to improve and make it a positive experience. And I have to also agree with Naomi that, a lot of times in the past that it was just the volunteer would introduce themselves and then not actively participate in the meeting. And I know when I participated in the meeting, I basically took over the meeting and ran the meeting, because that's just me. Because, I have a minor in peace and conflict studies. I know how to lead meetings. So
awesome.
So, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for sharing. And we hear loud and clear from many of you that we need to really revisit this co-host program and really make sure that it works the way you all intended to. So thank you. We've noted that and we'll definitely address that. I see a few hands raised. Venice, thanks for waiting. And then I think that's Ivanka after you. So go ahead, Venice.
Yeah, good evening. What I would like to recommend is that in addition to the notes that list the action items, that we add a separate column or a separate place to identify the public health concerns that are discussed or that are expressed. What we did find from the last however many meetings we've participated in, that the public health concerns have always been of interest to community members and residents, and that the focus on how this work impacts public health is really critical to people, and that is not only a way to recruit, but it's also a way to hold accountable the fact that this work in AB 617 is supposed to be of benefit to the community. And so being able to make that case very strongly, being able to connect it to public health concerns, and just continuously being clear about why the work is being done. And it's not just so that work can be done, it's really to be of public benefit. So I think that it would be useful to have a section that really identifies those public health concerns that keep being discussed.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, grounding it back to, I think, one of the main reasons we're all in this. Thank you. Ivanka, is that the 805 or the?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to bring up the point. To me, it's bigger than just the co-host conversation, but as a facilitator, if it's a topic where there should be input, because we're expecting that there should be input, and if there isn't, then that may be a sign that something was too heavily overloaded on residents on this committee to even respond to. So one of you were saying earlier how the transfer of that science or the heavy weighted materials to the community, a sure sign that that is happening, that it hasn't been translated properly in discussion, is when there's just that dead silence of no input. It's not that the community members on this panel don't have an opinion. It may just be that the information that is being thrown at them has not been translated down. So that really resonated with me when you had stated that, because I do see that that has been a problem in this process where the information is heavy and it needs to be broken down, and it may take you as the facilitator to get that so that it isn't just passed over. Okay, we can move on to the next thing. No, we really weren't ready to move on. It did need to be discussed more, but just broken down first. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so I'm hearing really check for understanding once these documents or reports are shared out. And I think that ties back to that translation and interpretation check. So yeah, definitely noted and agree that that's a proactive way as we as facilitators can ensure participation is that check for understanding. Thank you. All right. Would anyone else like to share anything regarding what success might look like? The other question was also what challenges might we encounter, and it feels like you all touched on some. But are there any other challenges you foresee in us encountering in our transition?
Jem, we have a comment on the chat from Janet, and then I did see Genevieve go off mute. I didn't know if you were going to add anything. No? Okay. Janet says, I'd like to see business and industry represented as co-hosts as well. Maintaining open and inclusive meetings is important.
Okay. Yeah, I think, that would be helpful to include. And it sounds like we're going to have a bigger discussion around co-hosts and making sure that's structured in a really inclusive and helpful way. So noted. Thank you.
We also had a comment in the chat from our Spanish channel. Barrett.
Yes, I see that. I'm going to read the one just before, and then I'll go to that one as well. Oh, wait. Yeah, here we go. It says, thank you for your interest in informing and participating in this meeting. It's important in how pollutants and the environment affects us in the Central Valley. It's a welcome to new members who are active today. Thank you for sharing. I saw someone had their hand up, but maybe not anymore.
Isabel.
Sí, yo había levantado la mano. Tengo un comentario.
Yes, I have raised up my hand and I have a comment.
No estoy muy familiarizada con las redes sociales. Me es muy difícil para mí entender todo lo que se publica, y inclusive en las cartas que mandaron donde dice de las instalaciones, pues están todos los nombres donde están las instalaciones, pero y que con eso nunca se mira lo que está pasando en esos monitores ni nada. Entonces quisiera yo mirar algo más claro en todo eso, cómo estar más enterada de lo que está pasando, porque la verdad que para mí es muy difícil entender todas las notas que mandan. Quisiera ver si se puede hacer algo mejor. Gracias.
Gracias, Isabel.
Hello, so this is from Isabel, and her comment is, I'm not very familiar with social media, and it's very hard to understand everything that is published and the letters that were sent on. There's on these different monitors, but I don't understand. I would like to see and have more clarity and be more aware of what's going on, because the things that are sent, I just don't understand.
Thank you for sharing. Yes, I think that goes back to the accessibility, again, with interpretation. And that's, again, tying it back to making sure the science and the data are accessible to everyone. That's something we definitely will follow up on. Thank you, Isabel. All right, we have 3 more minutes. And this is, and this isn't the end. it's always going to be an open door for your feedback and comments and concerns about facilitation, but really just want to make this intentional space for that right now. Is there anything else that you'd like us to keep in mind as your new facilitators? Any lessons learned from the previous facilitator, or things you like that they did that we should keep doing? Again, we just have a couple more minutes left before we move on to the next agenda item.
Also want to acknowledge that we see Lilia's comment about having clear and precise language. So that is also noted. Gracias, Lilia.
Yes. Oh, I see a comment here. I was not informed about the dates and times of subcommittee meetings.
I see, and I think that's a public, that's Laura. So all of those meetings are posted on our website, Laura, so on community.valleyair.org. So hopefully you can find them there. They're all listed under events, and that goes for every community subcommittee meeting. And then as the whole CSC knows, we all send all of those notices as well as calendar invites out to all of you. Thanks,
Hey,
Laura.
Jessica, quick question. Is there a listserv for AB 617 that she could sign up for that automatically sends her emails?
There is, and I believe and I'll double check if we'll see, Laura, if you're already signed up for that listserv. I believe right now, those should be, and I'm double check. I know I don't see Heather's off tonight, and she's the one who helps manage that listserv. So I believe all of those would still go to that same listserv. It would be specific to each community, and there's a general one. We don't send all of the subcommittee meetings to the general one because it's all the general updates. So it's possible, Laura, that you're just signed up for the general one. If you want Fresno specific updates, that's maybe where we'll send you. So Laura, I can drop in the chat right now the way to sign up, and this is actually for everyone, any of the listservs. So great idea, Genevieve.
Thanks, Jessica.
Awesome. Knocking things out already. Love it. All right. So with all that, thank you for your participation, your input, and your engagement. We've noted everything and heard loud and clear the recommendations and suggestions to make this better. So we are up to it. Thanks for sharing. And Jessica just shared the link on the chat, and I believe that's to access the. Okay. The first link on top of that is to sign up for the emails. All right, so with that, we can move on to the next agenda item. I'm going to pass it off to Jessica to walk us through the annual report review. Jess?
Thank you all, and I really just appreciate this discussion. And like Jem said, this is not the only time, obviously, that we can have feedback to the facilitators or directly to the district. And this annual report is just another example of something that we want to introduce to you. But I'll start off this agenda item with acknowledging, and you might remember the process we went through last year for the annual report review. Today is just a brief, hi, this is the annual report. This is how to take a look at it. We're not intending to have everyone digest all of this information at once. We did send out the annual report to the Spanish speaking folks, or the folks that prefer to communicate in Spanish. And so hopefully you can follow along. I'll share my screen here in just a moment. But basically what I'm going to do is just to introduce you to sort of what is in the annual report, let you know sort of the timeline by which we'll want comments and feedback and additions and suggestions from you all. And then just kind of highlight some areas in the annual report that look different, or maybe are just additions to last year. Obviously, it's been a year since we did this. And then I'll just briefly at the end review just a little bit of the timeline for getting this, not only the comments back to us, but for sort of the next steps for getting this out to CARB. So first off, I'm going to share my screen. I always like doing this. And even though all the emails we sent to you had links directly to the annual report, showing you kind of where everything lives. This is our community page. You can either go to reports down here and get the draft annual report. And that actually includes our annual enforcement report too, and I'll go over that in a second. or you can go to today's meeting and see it linked there. So I'm just going to click it from here, but that is listed in both English and Spanish there. And so the first thing you'll notice is it is labeled as an October 1st draft. That's because we are really looking for your input and feedback. We also do want to update. There's a lot actually that's happened since October 1st. We had a really busy first week of October, as you'll hear in the standing updates, with the truck rerouting, the land use subcommittee, and an outreach subcommittee meeting for air monitoring. So there's been a lot of updates that we want to make sure that we capture in this annual report because some of those are really key elements to really high priority items. So without scrolling and making everyone kind of dizzy, I'm just going to go over a couple of the sections that are different. While everything is updated and brought up to date, I'll just show you some added sections that just sort of really communicate out to the public all of the work that you have all done. So the first, of course, we just went over it and we're kind of in its practice today, is under community engagement. We do outline the process that we went through for new facilitator selection, and then talk just a lot about how obviously we've been it's been like one full year since our last report, and we've still been online. So just acknowledging that all the hard work and all of the extra meetings that you have all done has really been a virtual process. This was also the first full annual report cycle, at least, that we had that full resident stipend program. And so that's just outlined here and acknowledging all of that work and acknowledging all of the meetings that the residents have been at. And then we talk in here about some of the strategic planning efforts that we went through, as well as let anyone in the community know if they wanted to see the annual report. And once this is finalized and you want to share it with your community, you can really start showing folks some of the work that we did at the beginning of the year to go through that prioritization exercise. You can actually click on the links here. They are live to take us to those exercises. But we also did export everything into a table to sort of help folks understand what types of measures you are all working through as you meet as a CSC. So right here, we start to outline, but we have lots of details below if you remember the structure of the annual report from last year. And this is a draft. We actually do plan on making this a little bit more visual, actually, to a lot of discussion items earlier on. We wanted to provide this in a quick table format so people can understand what's going on, but we do want to, whether it's a Gantt chart or some other better data visualization, demonstrate what's going on in the community. But here, actually to the point, and one of the suggestions, I believe it was from Ivanka that mentioned, let's make sure at the very least we touch in on the annual report with what are our top priorities and how are we tackling those top priorities. So if you recall, we ranked category by category, all the different measures. And so those are outlined here. We also ranked the categories themselves. And so with the top 3 measures within each of the top 3 categories, we just highlight here where we're at with everything. And like I said, all of the details for every single measure are in the rest of the report. So starting with SC1, for example, is incentives for school air filtration. We just talk a little bit about kind of where we're at with that. Of course, we all know that this is on hold for the moment. We're getting a lot of information, and a lot of the details, again, are kind of further on in the incentives part of the report. As you all know, there's a lot of progress that's been made in vegetative barriers and urban greening. The top 3 measures in heavy duty were the truck reroute study, which we'll have a really great update on later in this meeting. The incentives for truck replacement is actually we're working with CARB on a project plan approval. And incentives for school buses, we have been working with school districts. We're trying to encourage participation in the program. And all of these, by the way, are all the statuses that you've seen in the tracker. So none of this should be new, but also we are working on or interested in getting your input on how you feel like that would be better communicated if you were to send this to a community member. And then finally, the third ranked category was land use. So the top 3 land use measures are in here, really kind of all related to that MOU or other administrative mechanism that we will also have a great update on later today. But just outlining here, high level what's going on. Again, we'll probably update this, or we will update this in more detail because we will have more detail. I do see Lisa's hand raised. Is it on something I've already presented on, Lisa? Because I'll definitely stop here so we don't have to keep scrolling.
No, it's on something totally different, but keep going.
Okay. All right. I'm going
to
to go out.
question.
Okay, yeah, I'll be brief because I do want to open it up. I just wanted to highlight and kind of walk through what it looks like in draft form and kind of the input that we want for the next step. And like I said, making it a little bit more visual. So someone who's a community member, if you just said, hey, you want to know what we've been working on? If you go to page 14 and 15, you can see kind of the top priority measures we've all been working on. But of course, the entire report is a much more detailed report. And then finally, I'll just kind of click through the high level sections are, of course, community air monitoring, and we talk about how we're fully deployed at every single school. We do show links to all of the different portals or to our website, as well as the AQView portal, which is from CARB. And again, a lot of you have already heard about that recently. Sorry, I realized I should have probably zoomed in. I'm sure that was very small. We have a whole section on our compliance and enforcement measures, and I'll show you in just a second. There's actually an entire separate report that specifically goes into all of our compliance and enforcement activities that I will show in a brief moment. And our regulatory measures, a lot of great updates here that you've all heard and seen through some of our listserv emails and our emails directly to you on some rules that have recently been amended and some public engagement that we've done. The land use measures section definitely will be updated even further. As you all know, you've been working really hard, especially on what we now have dubbed LU5. It wasn't originally in the SERP, but it will be, obviously we know that it's been a major inclusion since we adopted this with CARB. And then finally, last but certainly not least, or I should say it's not last, second to last before outreach are the incentives measures. Here we outlined for anyone who's kind of wondering, and again, it's in that tracker, but just a kind of a quick glance at what we're doing in terms of project plans. So what a project plan is, why it's necessary under CARB's guidelines, and then sort of the status of each of the measures, which kind of, I think, helps, it definitely helps me and hopefully helps you and the group kind of know, okay, where are we at with this? What do we need to move over into this approved bucket so we can start funding? Because that's definitely, as you scroll through the rest of this grant section, you'll see kind of the main, and this is where, like I said, a lot of detail, but you'll see a lot of these that have approved project plans are moving forward, but then there are several project plans that we need to kind of move forward because they are high priority items like wood burning devices, for example. And then certainly last but not least is where I'll talk about outreach and mitigation measures. Talking a lot about our recent outreach. We've come to you, I think, for a lot of, if not all of these items, where we've come and briefly told you about our outreach plan, gotten a lot of great feedback, and certainly a lot of great feedback even last night about outreach for air monitoring. And so we'll even add that in here to just let the community know all of the great outreach we've worked on together and get input, of course, on further outreach we can do to make sure people are aware of this program and aware of everything we're doing. And then finally, we point people to the measures trackers and talk about health impacts of air pollution and sort of really the reason that we're here. And it's also emphasized in the beginning is this is a public health, SERP. This is meant to reduce pollution and improve public health. Finally, I will go, this is the enforcement report. It's actually, in addition to everything that's listed in those tables, we have all of the details I think you could ever want for how the district is responding to or has responded to all of the enforcement commitments in the SERP. And so without scrolling through it and making you all dizzy, we list all of the facilities within the boundary. Then we go through all of the facility inspections and list them out individually with the dates and everything that's happened in the past year. And we go from July 2020 to June 30, 2021. So it's one full kind of fiscal year for us. We go a summary of all of the complaints that happened in the community boundary. And so, for example, here you can see maybe the owner operator, responsible party, the address, the name of the complaint, the type. So in this case, it was dust, whether or not we were able to confirm or issue a violation, and kind of what that happened with that particular complaint. So you can go through and dig through all of that. And then finally, this is a summary of violations found. So if we got a complaint or we did an inspection, what were the violations that were found and sort of what was the type of violation? So that's all detailed here. And you should be familiar if you saw our annual report last year with this format. It's the exact same format we did last year for the annual report. I will stop sharing my screen. I know I see Lisa's hand that has questions, and then any other thoughts and high level comments, and then I will just kind of let you know the timeline for getting feedback. Sorry, go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, a couple of things. First off, feedback is great. You want the community feedback, fabulous. But where's your real outreach to community other than just the internet? What are your public information meetings that you're having in the communities at the schools that, you know, have had questions, have had issues for the longest time? Also too, can you go back to one of your first screens where you show everything in English and Spanish? Because there is like a glaring issue there that you typically would understand. Okay, what is wrong with this page?
If I think you're about to say that this is in English, we do have, and maybe we need to let everyone know that we also, and I know we've demonstrated this
Spanish.
a couple of times.
Okay.
Yes. So we do have access to all of the community pages.
All right.
I'm sorry, I failed to mention that.
Yeah. Okay. Then that solves that problem. But, you know, my question is, once you get like a final draft of this, and that's what I think you're asking for, not a final comments. I think of when are you going out to the public to get feedback? And that gives you an opportunity not only to update the community of interest of what is going on, but also too, it's your opportunity to talk about wood burning. It's your opportunity to talk about emissions. How do you get your cars fixed? How do you turn in your cars? And all that other information. So you could actually do an air district fair if you think about it. But, you know, it takes a lot of planning, a lot of detail, and a lot of communication skills. And, you know, because we keep hearing from schools and there's not a lot of good input from the schools. So, you know, I look at it, they have cafeterias, we're allowed to go back in now, I think. So, you know, here's your opportunity to start doing, you know, on the ground outreach to people versus this passive computer stuff.
Lisa, you bring up something I totally, to your point, and someone was asking me the other day about like in-person events, because like we did that Friday Night Live, we did these virtual fairs when we could and tried to engage the community. We've had a lot of great work from really several of you, some of your organizations who have done a lot of on the ground work for Vegetative Barriers, for example. But to your point, we are working on, because it's an ask directly from that community. In Shafter, we're working on an in-person, kind of in a month or so, an in-person event specifically for the community for their lawn and garden replacement, mostly because they cannot drop off their lawn and garden equipment anywhere in their community. The closest place we have to drop off old equipment is in Bakersfield. So we're kind of we're coming up with an event in person. And to your point, actually, we're using that as an opportunity to do a lot of other outreach. So I'm wondering if actually, to your point, we work with our outreach team and do something to try to put something similar together in Fresno. And maybe it's not directly at that one particular measure, but it's something like you said, where it's outreach, it's a fair, we hand out flyers, we get people, it's kind of like that Friday Night Live. It is a certain commitment.
Jessica, do not use the example of Friday Night Lives. I participated in that and it was not that impressive. In fact, I think it wasted everybody's time because literally, I think there was more staff than actual community members. And I think there was actually more committee members on it than actual.
So I think your point,
I'm going to step in here, Lisa and Jessica. It sounds like there needs to be some sort of community engagement, outreach and engagement plan to help bring in more authentic feedback from the community besides what currently has happened. I'm also seeing that Lilia has a comment.
Excuse me, doctor. I think that what I was trying to say is that the anchors here are the elementary schools. And that's where I would start. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for clarifying that. So that is an action item that we're noting. And in the interest of time, Lisa and Jessica, I just want to call on Lilia for a second, and then I had saw a hand up earlier. But Lilia, can you go off mute?
Sí, buenas noches nuevamente. Mi tema ahorita es el tema de la página 56 en español, es la página 56 sobre el verde, el área verde que necesitamos o dónde podemos barreras vegetativas. Ese es el tema que me interesa ahorita. Sabemos que este lunes tuvimos un desastre natural aquí en el Valle Central con el aire. Entonces, ¿dónde queremos poner árboles? Ese es un punto muy importante. Más que nada queremos dónde vamos a quitar los árboles viejos primero que nada. Los árboles viejos en esta ocasión hicieron desastres en las propiedades privadas que vienen siendo los hogares de las casas de las personas que viven. Una, dos, muchos autos quedaron abajo de esas ramas grandes o hasta de árbol con toda raíz se vinieron abajo. Entonces, vino la ciudad, está cortando los árboles, las ramas que quedaron, pero nos dejan esos mugrosos, yo les voy a decir la palabra así ya groseramente, mugrosos a troncos que se ven horribles en nuestra comunidad. Entonces, ¿dónde queremos esos árboles? Ya lo dijimos anteriormente, ya parecemos un disco rayado de los de antes. Volvemos a repetir la misma palabra y la misma pregunta. Queremos que quiten lo que está más viejo y ponerlo nuevo. Necesitamos árboles, es verdad, mucho verde necesitamos, pero también tenemos que les den mantenimiento a los árboles que ya están en existencia también. Ese es mi punto de vista y yo pienso que las compañeras estamos pasando por lo mismo, ya que muchas personas de mi comunidad fueron afectados por estos árboles grandes, esas ramas que están todavía atoradas en los cables de la luz y el PG&E no puede venir a hacer nada porque no pueden, no sé por qué, que tarda tiempo. ¿Qué están esperando? ¿Que se caiga el cable de la luz al piso y llega a otro desastre peor? No podemos esperar eso. Entonces tenemos que trabajar más fuerte y donde necesitamos los árboles tenemos que identificarlos y los lugares yo pienso que la comunidad ya sabemos dónde los queremos, solamente queremos que también nos limpien lo que ya tenemos, por favor. Y disculpen lo agresivo, no soy agresiva, simplemente que ya parecemos que estamos aquí nada más trabajando de más, estamos aportando de más y no vemos la acción. Entonces queremos la acción más que nada. Gracias nuevamente.
Gracias, Lilia. No hay necesidad de disculparse.
This is the topic that I have is in page 56 in Spanish, where the green part is. On Monday on the Central Valley, we had a disaster here. So we really need to see where we need to plant more trees because we have all these old trees and we have the disaster that those trees came down, even the roots and a lot of cars were under those trees and damaged the houses of the people who live there. So I know that the city was cutting all those trees and the old trees, but they left us with those logs, the old logs that are ugly and they look really bad. So we really need them to pick up the old logs that we have there and start planting more green, more trees. We need to identify where to plant all those trees. And I'm sorry that I'm being a little aggressive here, but we also see that those cables, the power cables are stuck on those trees. So we really need the city to clean that up. We don't want another disaster, and we really need to identify where those things need to be done. We are working here, and I'm so sorry that I'm being aggressive, but we really need your help in addressing all those problems that we have right here.
Thank you for sharing, Lilia. I'm not seeing any hands raised or questions right now in the chat. So maybe this is if anyone from the city wants to speak to that, this might be an opportunity.
So just regarding trees, to clarify the question, are we talking about the wind event and trees down?
That's right.
All right, very good. Yes, we had Scott Mosier, Public Works. I wanted to briefly report on that. Citywide, we had a very, very large number of calls, over 250 tree calls. That's really unprecedented for a wind event. Usually in a storm with some wind, we may get 10 to 20, maybe 30 calls. This is the largest one we've had in over 10 years. So the first priority was safety. Emergency, we normally only have 2 tree crews running. We reallocated staff. We formed up 12 different tree crews First priority was clear the roads, clear sidewalks, clear driveways, but a lot of that debris had to be left from the wind event just along the parking lane, by the curb, in the gutter, by the side of the road. Crews were working till 2 a.m. On that removal. So we are coming back to do that cleanup, but it'll be many days of work to clean that up. So yes, absolutely. And then where trees have been lost, those provide good opportunities for tree replanting projects where the city, perhaps partnered with Tree Fresno, can implement some new planting. So thank you, Naimeen. Great point.
That was Lilia. And
oh, I'm sorry.
But you can give me credit, Scott. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lilia.
Thank you, Scott. Were there any other questions? And Jessica, did you want to wrap up? I feel like you said you want to talk about timeline.
I did, yes. So we will send a follow-up email, but we are looking to have all comments received by November 1st. So if you do, as you scroll through, of course, if you have questions, call us anytime. But if you did want to put together some comments or some thoughts by November 1st, that way we have some time to get out our next draft to you all. And we do plan on taking an update to our governing board in November. So we hope that by then, we will have even more progress made. But by November 1st, that way we can even touch on it on our next agenda if you all would like during the agenda setting to maybe make a brief space to look over any of the updates. We can make that space, but of course it's up to you all. So I'll just end with that and let you know we will follow up with an email. So thank you.
Awesome. Are there any more questions regarding what has just been shared by Jessica or comments? All right, we're a bit ahead of schedule. That's great. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Each person will have about 5 minutes to provide their updates so that we have enough time for questions at the end. I'll pass it off to Brian Moore from CARB to start us off with any updates.
Awesome, thanks, Jim. The one main update I have is that there's going to be a CARB board meeting on October 28th that'll be through Zoom. And during that meeting, there will be a general program update on AB 617. And so that item will start at 4 p.m. And I'll paste in a link to the meeting notice and all the information. So on that board item, you can comment in writing before the meeting through the link I'm going to send, or you can also comment verbally during the meeting. So other than that, any questions about that general update, you can ask me now, or feel free to email me or call me. I'll put my number and email in the chat too. So thanks.
Any questions or comments for Brian? All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised or nothing in the chat. I'll pass it off next to Ivanka to provide us an update on the truck rerouting subcommittee. Ivanka?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. So we had the subcommittee for truck rerouting, and within that subcommittee, we were able to give Jill with the city any further questions or concerns that we think needed to be included in their questions of the interviewing of the two consultants that came forward with their request for proposal. It was we did the two separate interviews this past week, and it was a unanimous that everyone really felt that IBI, am I saying that right? IBI, as the consultant, was the better of the two consultants, mostly because it was just...
excuse me, I don't think you're supposed to discuss that part publicly because it hasn't been granted, I don't think. Tell me if I'm wrong, Scott.
I was defer to Scott.
That's a great point, Lisa. Ivanka, that's correct. We probably don't want to go into a lot more detail, but the recommendations of the subcommittee would then come before, through a proposed contract, would come back before the full steering committee.
But how do we, but isn't there supposed to be, okay, if that's the law with the city's process, but how are we supposed to tell them that we thought there was one clear that would fit better than the other if we're supposed to get in feedback from this group? I'll let you do it then, because I really think that, I don't think that our subcommittee was the group that was making the final decision. It was supposed to come back to this group to say, this is the things that we heard and why we think we liked one better than the other. But
Ivanka, you're doing great on this. That's a great summary. And I think, yeah, really, and then the full steering committee, as I understand it, will hear the subcommittee recommended one of the firms. Then, here was their proposal, here's the full contract, and then it comes before the full steering committee for that, concurrence and approval.
Well, can we say why we thought one was better than the other without naming them?
I think you could, maybe some highlights of what you like better, but for the benefit of the steering committee, you're kind of hearing that without having the full materials and background in front of you. So, we'd anticipate maybe next month that full, and I see Jessica is nodding that could work for the agenda, that full item that you could see the full proposal and what the strengths were. But Ivanka's you're doing a great job of summarizing that right now.
Well, you know me, I'm only going to speak the truth. So, so I'm going to hand it off. I'll just say that there were things that we thought that the steering committee would have uplifted that we saw, which was really based around community engagement, hearing the residents, kind of very similar to some of the points that we made in talking about the facilitator that we now have with Harding, how they would be a consultant for making sure that in that space, they're hearing from the different groups in the process of a truck study. So I'll stop there, because if I'm on legal funny ground, I don't want to mess with that, but it is moving forward. Yeah, I'll stop.
Thank you, Ivanka. All right, if there's nothing else to add there, we'll hear some updates on subcommittee meetings. And just a reminder, we'll have a few minutes at the end of this agenda item to have any more questions. So you all can submit any more questions there. Genevieve, can you start us off with air monitoring subcommittee updates?
Sure. I was told that I can share my screen, and it looks like I can. So I am giving the update on the subcommittee meeting for air monitoring and outreach. And the first part I'll talk about is the district shared their new interactive map for the air monitors in the 617 community. And as you can see here, this is the 617 page. And the first piece of advice that residents gave was that there should be a button, maybe like right on the front here, that links to the air monitoring page so that we don't have to search for it. And that was the first piece of advice. But if you do follow through here and go down to community air monitoring for Fresno, the district added this interactive air monitoring location map here. And if you click that, you can actually see the monitors on a map, which is really helpful, especially if you don't know the names of all the schools or the locations. And you can click and follow that to the monitoring page of each monitor there. So for instance, at West Fresno, we're in the green at the moment for PM 2.5. So going back, another piece of advice that the committee gave to the district was to actually make the map viewable right on this page, so that, because this doesn't really scream out at you. And so that was one piece of advice there. The second thing that we discussed was we had a discussion of the district's air quality notification and outreach efforts. And this conversation started off with an admission that the district's outreach program is not 100% effective, and that staff are open for advice and making changes to better help the community. So moving from that, we talked about the need for text alerts and other methods of communication, which we kind of touched on today, that are in addition to our online portals, because the websites and social media is not accessible for everyone. So we talked about additional ways to alert community members. We also talked about evaluating the district's outreach plan for air monitoring, and that the first step should be understanding what the schools are currently doing during bad air events and what are those gaps between what's happening and what are the best practices. So kind of starting off with the needs assessment and then creating a plan to meaningfully connect schools in the community to AB 617 monitoring data and use education to make the school's response practices safer for kids. So we're going to be working on this outreach plan together, and we're meeting again next month. The third and last thing we discussed was that CARB shared a very brief update on their statewide air monitoring portal that they're working on. And the thing to know about this is that they're working really hard at bringing together all the data statewide into one portal. And so there's more on this to come, but know that they're working on this. And as a brief reflection on the meeting, I wanted to share that I felt that this meeting was uniquely collaborative in the sense that I believe we started at a place where the district showed good faith effort to provide this interactive map that we had asked for, and also admitted that their outreach program could be improved. And so I think that starting off the meeting on the right foot, we all together worked in a pretty collaborative manner, wanting to solve these problems rather than assigning blame. So kudos to the district for starting off the meeting on the right foot. And also thank you to all the residents who share their really important insight, especially grateful for Isabel's insight. And I'm looking forward to acting on that as we move forward. So I'll close by asking everyone on the meeting today to participate in the next meeting if you are at all interested in air monitoring, air pollution alerts, children health, and school outreach efforts. And I will stop share now if I can figure out how. There we go. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Genevieve. And I mean, clap your hands if you didn't see that. Great. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Jess to talk about vegetative barriers.
Maybe I'll even pass it. Erin might be here too, but I'll briefly update that we are still working on, we owe a draft RFP. And so we need to schedule a subcommittee meeting, but obviously we want to give you the draft RFP ahead of the subcommittee meeting so we have something to review. So we're sort of in the final stages. Erin, I don't know if we have an update on timing on what that might look like.
We're still drafting both simultaneously. They're separate. Vegetative barriers are green. They're actually separate RFPs. We're in the middle of drafting those now, going back and forth, making sure we have everything that's required. And once we're ready for that, which will be shortly, given to the subcommittee to review and then take to the full committee.
You're kind of cutting out, Erin, but from what I just quickly, I think basically you're just saying that vegetative barriers will be a separate RFP from urban greening, which makes sense. One, right, is to like create a barrier and one is to plant trees. So there'll be separate RFPs. So there'll be 2 RFPs for the subcommittee to review. And maybe in a few weeks, we could be ready to send that out, meaning when we send that out, maybe as I'm guessing, when we can doodle for the committee meeting to maybe a couple weeks after that, meet after they've had time to review.
Correct.
Awesome.
All right. We have actually a good amount of time. We have about 10 minutes, actually maybe 15 minutes for any questions about any of the updates that were just shared. So any questions for CARB, for the city or anyone else? Or comments? Comments are also very welcome. Lisa, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
You guys are going to learn I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of opinions. Yeah, I got a question going into the holidays about scheduling meetings. And I'm thinking, can we have a moratorium of all meetings from December 13th through the first No, Naomi, why? Because I really don't want to discuss air quality Christmas week. I really just don't.
But it's when it's more relevant. Some of the worst days is between Christmas and New Year's Eve, or not.
Okay, just not Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, okay?
We can promise that for sure.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I just noticed, I apologize, I skipped over this. Are there any updates from the Land Use Subcommittee?
Oh, yes.
I just caught that. My apologies. From anyone from the city, can you provide an update on that?
Hey, everybody, it's Greg Barfield. I'm glad you skipped it because I was on the phone with my boss. So
worked out.
The city manager. So I was just asking Scott, hey, did you guys do this? We met the other week, and the air board will get to us a copy of the recorded meeting, because we're going to, Jennifer Clark said something very eloquent, which was really a description of what the letter should read and how it should read. And so we're going to take that and put it into an outline, as well as either someone from the CSC or the air board. We're going to get us the West Oakland MOU, because we've never seen an MOU and never had any clue what should be in it. So we're waiting on those two things. And we look forward to meeting again the week before we meet again next month. So that's the update.
Thank you, Gregory. I'm glad that that skipping worked out.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Are there any questions or comments? Lisa, I see your hand up. Is that the same hand or is this a new hand?
No, I don't need to talk to you guys. So, I'll
Stay
take
on
my
hand, Lisa. Stay
No
on hand.
worries.
Lowering your
We're
hand.
here. Genevieve, go ahead.
Thanks. Just on the thought that maybe some examples of MOUs would be helpful. I know that there are some really effective MOUs out there, especially I think CARB has one with the rail yards. The South Coast has developed a few with different industries. And so I'd be happy to send a few of those examples along. Maybe I can just send them to Jessica or someone to then pass along, if that's helpful.
Yeah, if I can, that's just making me think of Naomi's comment earlier about making everything accessible. Is this something we could probably upload on the site?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, that'd be great. Jess, do you have your hand up?
I do. I just dropped a link in the chat. It actually is the video recording, not only of the Land Use Subcommittee, because that was something Gregory said that they were waiting on, but it's also the video recording for every subcommittee meeting, and it lives on the website. And actually, I'm looking in continuous improvements. I'm looking at ways we call it other meetings here because it's subcommittee meetings and extra meetings, but we could rename this to make it more apparent that it's subcommittee meeting materials or something that directs people to this site where you can go and watch all of the video recordings, see the chat transcripts. So to Gregory's point, Jennifer I think she did do a good job summarizing all of the committee members' comments at one point. And so I think that's what he's referring to if you want to go there as well. So.
Yep, awesome, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, any other questions, comments before we move on to the next item? Okay, so now we can. I just muted myself. Nice. Sorry. So the second to last thing we have on here, we'll go over some next steps. But before we do that, we want to do the agenda setting for next month's meeting. So let me just share my screen really quick so you all have it in front of you. All right. So in an effort to include more folks in the agenda setting process, because we understand there's a separate agenda setting meeting that happens the following week, we will be reserving time at the end of each meeting, each CSC meeting, to ask for your topic suggestions for future meetings. So as of now, the suggestions from CSC members include CARB and district budget. This is already going to be an agenda item for November CSC meeting, even though it's listed under suggestion. And then we also have the EV mechanic training. So I guess, Jess, do you want to add some framing before we open it up to suggestions?
Absolutely. So there were a couple of things. Last month was kind of a funky one. We had to move the meeting because of that standing conflict with the TCC meeting. And so with that, we moved our agenda setting meeting. And there were several comments, and we agree that although we don't have every evening open for a bunch of extra evening meetings, we wanted to make sure that people were able to provide input into the agenda setting space. So we thought we'd try this out. The couple of folks that did join us during the agenda setting meeting suggested we maybe do a couple of things. And the first was that we add some time specifically when we already have the captive audience. You were all here. So if we do have thoughts right now, although this won't be the only space, to provide input for the next agenda, this would be a great opportunity. The other thought, if you guys are all okay and we can just kind of go by consensus and see if it works, is right now the agenda setting meeting is an hour from 4 to 5 p.m. And we were thinking sort of in tandem, if we have this 20 minutes or so at the end of the meeting, or 15 minutes or so, I can do math, at the end of the meeting, as well as take that agenda setting meeting, but make it half an hour and move it to 5 p.m. to see if more people are available at 5 rather than at 4. If that was a way we can encourage a little bit more participation, and then writing down a lot of notes about really making that meaningful community co-host, we can kind of all have more availability to have that meaningful engagement. So that was sort of the thought that a couple of CSC members came up with at the last smaller agenda setting meeting, and we wanted to propose it here and kind of try it out today.
All right, thanks for that framing, Jess. Sorry, I was having a hard time finding my mute button. All right, so with that, we will open the floor to hear from you all for any topics, suggestions for the agenda. Naimeen, you have your hand up? Go for it.
Well, I don't know. I think that what we have discussed is that the budget item in itself is going to take a lot of time. And the original idea was to actually have like a separate, session, training, meeting, whatever you want to call it, to go over that. So I'm not sure if I feel that lumping it into with these other topics is the best way, but I also hear what in a way Lisa was saying. We're at a point of meeting burnout, so maybe we don't want to create another meeting. But if that's the case, do we, for example, can you put up the agenda again?
Oh, yes.
And I'll clarify this. We are kind of listing general agenda topics. So if we do want to make the next meeting exclusively budget, we can kind of decide that maybe now. And then just if we have other topics, we can kind of just add them to the list to be included maybe in December or January. So I don't even think at this point in my mind, EV mechanic training would be added. I think it would just be the budget and then maybe quick standing updates just to get business out of the way was kind of what I heard at the last time we talked about it.
Okay, thank you for the clarification, because right now the way that I see this, it make it seem that, oh, we're going to talk about this in the next meeting. And obviously I want to learn more and hear more about the mechanic training, but I don't think it's as time sensitive as the other one. So if we table it for December, even January, I don't think it's a big deal. But I also have one other suggestion or request, and this is a request on behalf of not only myself, but also Dr. Jonathan London and Dr. Ricardo Cisneros. So the three of us are part of the interdisciplinary research project with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and we're leading evaluation of the AB 617 implementation in Chapter and Fresno. And we would love, and you don't have to give us the space in November, because I just said that we would probably do the agenda only, but We would love to have the opportunity to explain to you in no more than 10 or 15 minutes at the most what our project is, and get your feedback, your ideas. So that's one additional topic. But in the meantime, if we do not do in next month our presentation, I also want to let you know that we are part of CCJM's area that is we are leading in this effort is the implementation of a survey regarding air quality perceptions and how it affects health. And people who are invited to participate is a convenient sample. So anyone who lives or works in the communities of Chapter or South Central Fresno is eligible to participate. Since we have grant money, we're giving a $30 gift card stipend for those who participate. I'll put it is an electronic survey, so it's using Qualtrics. I'll put the 2 links in chat. And the only thing is that our idea is to administer the survey personally, but if you submit your survey and you want to get your gift card, you will have to send me a text message or an email, or just contact me and I'm happy to meet with you to help you do the survey. So that's my shameless plug.
Thanks for that shameless plug. And I have a shameless question to that plug. What's the deadline for the survey?
We would like to have them complete. So our goal is 100 surveys in Fresno and 50 in Chapter, and we would like to complete them, mid-November, end of November at the latest. And we already are halfway through in Fresno, so there are not a lot of spots left.
Awesome, thank you. I see Ed has their hand up, and then Genevieve. Ed, go ahead.
Thank you. I just have some concerns about the process for the mechanic training. I really believe that there's some sweet spots. We kind of have missed the first one, which would have been registration for students this September. The next one is going to be sometime in January. I really would like to see us begin that process. We did at the convening, we had the retired speaker or the retired professor from Delta College speak about what are the challenges for bringing the communities up. And one of his comments was that one of the issues is that that the level of reading and writing is oftentimes in our impacted communities way lower than entry into a college program for electricians. And I really want to begin to sort that out and see how we can spend that money to bring the community members into that fold and provide whatever mentoring or additional training would get them into that. And that's why I just would like, I'm requesting that we not put that process off longer than we should. There's a lot of work to do there, and it's going to require all our minds to be successful at it. So thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Jess, I saw you raise your hand. Are you going to respond to Ed?
If I can I promise I'll be brief, Genevieve. I was just going to say, Ed, I'll reach out to you. We did have a great conversation actually with Salvador from Delta College last week. I think you were out or unavailable. And I wonder if we can do some work, pre-work, and then maybe provide short update to the committee on some of that work. So we can do that work ahead of time and maybe not take a lot of the space that I keep hearing from the majority of the group about, saving that time for that budget discussion, but making sure maybe we move stuff along. We don't have to wait till the meetings to move stuff along. So we'll reach out to you tomorrow morning and call about maybe having another meeting because of course this is on all the certs, right? And so I think there's a lot of work, a lot of thought to put behind all of these.
I agree. And for everyone else's benefit, there are more than just South Central Fresno that has this in their SERP. Stockton does too. The sooner we can put it together and make it work for everybody, I think the better off we'll be. And potentially, I just want to remind our group, vocational education, electric mechanics potentially can make $100,000 a year. 2 years out of college. That brings some people into our communities or brings some help for good jobs into our communities. It's really important. So thank you, Jess. I'm looking forward to talking to you tomorrow.
Thank you, Ed. And thanks, Jess. Genevieve, sorry to cut there. I just wanted to close that loop on that convo.
Oh, no, not at all. I feel like I'm talking too much, so apologies. But on the agenda setting question, I would love to have a meeting devoted to stationary sources and where we are on the best available control technology stuff, as well as the facilities within the 617 community. And I'd be happy to host that and perhaps co-host that with Ed or Janet and make it collaborative. But I would like to focus on that sometime, maybe early next year.
Noted. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any other suggestions for future agenda topics that you'd like us to note? Also keeping an eye on the chat. Jess, I see your hand up.
I was just going to ask if you can see, Jem, if there are any objections to that, the second piece of it, which was moving to 5 p.m. The day, which would be next Wednesday at 5 rather than 4 to 5, and it would just be half an hour.
So 5 to 5:30, right?
5 to 5:30.
Are there any objections to pushing the meeting back to 5 p.m. and shortening it to 30 minutes? And to compensate for that, we are adding at the end of every CSC meeting this agenda setting item for everyone else to participate. So any objections to the proposal to changing next Wednesday's meeting to 5 p.m. from 5 p.m. to 5:30 Pacific time? Sorry, that was a mouthful. I don't think there's a thumbs down option. So if you have an objection, please raise your hand. Zoom is so positive. There's no thumbs down. Okay, I don't see any objections. Okay. As Isabel said, para mí está bien. Okay, sounds good. All right, so we are going to move the next agenda setting meetings at 5 p.m. next Wednesday, and it'll go for 30 minutes. Awesome. Are there any other comments or questions for agenda setting? And again, we'll do this for the next meeting. I think we're already set for November's agenda. Estela, igualmente para mí también. All right. Sounds good for Estela also. All right, we will move to the last thing, which is public comments. But I guess before that, Jess, are there any additional oh, I'm sorry, I will go through the next steps and then I'll pass it to Jess. All right, so you gave us a lot of marching orders on our first day. So we've noted them all and we will get right to work, but let me just recap on a few of them or on most of them. So thank you, team, for noting this. So we have for action items and next steps to create a system to ensure that all documents and materials produced for CSC related events are both displayed during the CSC meeting and are archived online with proper timestamping. We also will, as facilitators, will review at least the last 2 sessions to track status of action items that were mentioned and update the current list of action items. I think that goes hand in hand with the suggestion of the Gantt chart. Also, we will be creating a running list of action items with a separate column to identify all public health concerns that are discussed. We will conduct an assessment of translation and interpretation needs, making sure that it's accommodating everyone. Develop a process for inviting, selecting, and engaging co-hosts. That sounds like it's going to be a longer conversation, so we will definitely revisit that. And I think with that, inviting other residents or business, I think it was business representatives of an industry to invite for co-hosts as well. Air districts will send out listservs to help the public join the email communication so they're kept informed of all CSC and subcommittee meetings. The city of Fresno will remove dead tree debris. Try saying that 5 times fast, that was difficult. The community steering committee will submit comments on the annual report by November 1st. Air District and Genevieve will send examples of a myriad of MOUs, and we'll be posting that on the site so it's accessible to everyone. And volunteers who want to participate in the evaluation of AB 617 implementation should contact Nayamin Martinez. And then lastly, Jess will follow up with Ed about the EV mechanic training needs and potentially adding to SERP. Are there any questions or comments on any of the action items I just read out? All right, I will pass it off to Jess for some closing remarks and wrapping up, and then we will open up to public comments.
I just want to thank you all. I took down a lot of notes, and I know that obviously based on her summarizing them just now, so did Harder and Company. Like I said, I'll just be brief. We will follow up with the folks that we just mentioned. We will follow up with. We will be renaming, just to add a little bit, we will rename that other meetings thing to steering committees, or subcommittees and other meetings, so that folks kind of know where to go. And documents submitted by the steering committee that are just that are sent out, we will find a place to post them on the site so that it's easy to find things that are submitted, or even for example, recent emails that we've sent out. We'll find a place for them on the website and point everyone out to that. And with that, I just want to thank you all, and I'll pass it back to Jem, and thank Jem so much for her great first facilitation of the Fresno CSC.
Thanks all. Thank you, Jess. We are ahead of time, so we have plenty of time. We have about 16 minutes for public comments. So if you are joining on YouTube, you can enter it there, and Facebook as well. You can direct it to @AirValley or send it to the email. And for those of you joining us on Zoom, you can submit your public comments on chats, or you can unmute yourselves.
So far, there have none been submitted on YouTube, just for the record.
Awesome, thank you.
And just so you all know, we did take copious notes. So I'm going to share my screen for a second so that you all could see these. So as everyone's talking, we're taking notes and creating action items that are succinct, but we have more detailed action items with steps and recommendations for next steps that we will share as we meet with each of you all during the debrief meetings and our check-ins with the Air District. And in addition to that, we heard you loud and clear that you want us to have a better visual way to track these things. So we'll be working to ensure that we come up with a system where you can track them and see them online in a digestible way.
Thank you, Amy. All right, any burning thoughts, questions that you'd like to submit for public comments? Now is the time. Do you have any questions for us as your new facilitators? I mean, go do it.
No, I was gonna say, it is not a question, it's a comment. This was a miracle. Normally we run always over time. I don't recall we have ever finished a meeting with 14 minutes to spare.
Wow, that is our gift to you tonight. That's good to hear. Thank you. Hopefully that's a good sign. We'll work out. All right. I'm not seeing anything in the chat, nothing on YouTube or Facebook. Okay.
Bueno, ¿puedo hacer un comentario fuera del tema?
Claro que sí.
Pero
Can I make a brief comment without
the topic? Mi trabajo que estoy haciendo ahorita aquí en la comunidad es hacer los reportes que están sobre los basureros clandestinos. Entonces, lamentablemente yo he ya identificado las esquinas donde las personas les gusta tirar la basura constantemente. Entonces, han mirado el nombre de Lilia Becerril en el Fresno, porque lo tengo más de 200 veces reportado. Últimamente estoy mirando este proceso, entonces estoy con la ciudad de Fresno ahorita reportando que ustedes, o sea, la persona que se encarga del Fresno, si está la persona de la ciudad aquí para que tome nota, que para mí es bien importante que cuando manden un reporte para atrás diga completado, sea de verdad completado y no tenga que yo regresar a revisar ese reporte que se hizo. Yo hago los reportes, tardan 2, 3 días y les vuelvo a mandar segundo reporte. Pasan 2, 3 días, vuelvo a pasar 3 días, 4 días, tercer reporte. Me mandan para atrás el papel y me dicen, ya con el mensaje está completado. Eso me da gusto, está completado. Voy a mirar, tomo foto otra vez y no está completado. Entonces, quisiera saber cómo poder trabajar más de cerca con ustedes de verdad, porque mi trabajo es más que nada mantener esos tiraderos clandestinos que ya no existan, agarrar a la gente que lo tira, porque ese es mi punto, que quiero agarrar a esas personas que tiran esas basuras en los callejones y hacer conciencia con las personas que viven en esas calles, en esas callejones en la parte de atrás, que de verdad dejan esas ramas de sus árboles caídas y allí viven los indigentes. Ahí hacen sus excrementos o sus necesidades los indigentes. Entonces, quiero que todas las personas, yo estoy por mis redes sociales motivando a la gente que por favor corten sus ramas que están caídas, corten su maleza, porque estamos en incendios, estamos provocando. Los indigentes no miden, ellos tienen fríos, quieren calentarse y hacen quemadero y se queman las propiedades. Entonces, ese es mi trabajo solamente para relacionado con la ciudad y si hay perros muertos, también reportarlos a donde tienen que ser. Claro que sí. Perdón, yo pensé que ya estaban interpretando.
I'm so sorry. I'm going over. I thought that they were already interpreting. So I'm going to interpret the first part of this so I make sure that I'm not losing all of her message because that is a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So this is Lilia. I'm taking reports of the different places where trash has been thrown where it shouldn't be. And I'm taking a report of the places where it's going on. And that's probably why you've seen my name a lot, Lilia Becerril, on Fresno. And it's very important that when I send that report and that report says completed, that it gets completed. Because normally I send this report and then it says completed. And then 3 days later, I go to check out and see if it's actually happened and it's still there. So I send another report and it said it's completed again. So I want to make sure that there's follow through and that if it says completed, that it is completed. And my job here is just, I want to see if I could work closer to the city and work hand in hand to make sure that this isn't happening. Because my point is, I want there to not have this trash anymore. And I go into those alleyways, and these are also places where homeless people are, getting their business done sometimes, and it's not pleasant. So my point here is to remove it completely. Y siga adelante, Lilia, con su siguiente parte del comentario.
De las cosas es que hay muchas personas que somos tan inconscientes y porque hay muchas personas que me incluyo entre ellas a veces que se nos hace fácil tirar nuestros perros muertos en las callejones. Entonces, en las cajas de cartón. Yo digo en mi fe, yo voy a hacer una carne asada atrás de mi yarda, me va a llegar el olor, tengo que ser consciente y hacer el reporte. Lamentablemente, aquí tiraron un perro de esos que parecen Beethovens hace poco, aquí hace un par de años, aquí atrás de una casa. Toda la colonia olía y nadie decía nada. Entonces digo, ¿cómo es posible que ese un animal que parece un burro ahí tirado no lo reporten? O sea, que tengamos conciencia las personas. O sea, eso estamos contaminando más el medio ambiente. Todo eso es lo que hago yo en mis redes sociales y nada más para que las personas entren en conciencia que todo eso nos está afectando. No solamente los contaminantes, sino todas las basuras que tiramos en los callejones, todas las basuras que tiramos en las calles. Quisiera que las multas fueran más severas para estas personas, porque de verdad sí no está. Yo tengo ahorita un video aquí de una persona que me pasó su video, donde una persona va arrastrando un colchón a mitad de calle y el día siguiente aparece en el callejón. Yo ese video lo tengo que reportar directamente a donde se tiene que dar las recompensas, porque ya voy a hacer recompensas. Eso es lo que voy a hacer de aquí para adelante para poder encontrar y les den sus multas a estas personas que tiran las basuras ilegalmente en las calles.
And another thing is that there's just so much people that aren't conscious, and I'll include myself sometimes into those people that throw their dead dogs in the alleyways. And it smells so bad. A couple of years ago, there was a dog that looks kind of like a Beethoven. And the stench was so bad that the whole neighborhood was complaining. And nobody even noticed that it was there. And so I just try to create some more for people to be more conscientious, as that's what I use my social media to talk about. I have a video of a person who was dragging their mattress through the street and then it ended up in the alleyway. And so I just want this to stop.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias, Lilia. All right. Anything else for public comments? Okay. We will give you 8 minutes back to your evening. Thank you so much for your time, your participation, and your energy. We really look forward to working with you all. Buenas noches.
Bye all. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you, Tanya and Amelia.
Great job.
Of course. Thank you so much. And I know that they want to do an evaluation, so just let us know if we can help with anything. If translation is not working or interpretation needs help,